parents and teachers in various communities lately, whether ID, intelligent design, may be presented to adult scientific professionals is another question altogether, but also controversial. It's now roiling the government-supported Smithsonian Institution, where one scientist has had his career all but ruined over it. Scientist is Richard Sternberg, a research associate at Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in Washington. The holder of 2 PhDs in biology, Mr. Sternberg was, until recently, the managing editor of a nominally independent journal published at the museum. When I wrote the book, How Big Is Your God?, part of it takes place at the Smithsonian. And part of it takes place with a scientist who is struggling with the idea of Christianity versus science, and he takes a stand and all but loses his job. I had no idea that this was taking place here in real life. Well, until recently, he was editor of a nominally independent journal published at the museum, Proceedings of the Biological Society of Washington. Sounds like a scintillating journal, where he exercised final editorial authority. The August issue included typical articles of taxonomical topics, that is, on a new species of hermit crab. I just find that fascinating, and I would probably want to memorize it. It also includes an atypical article, The Origin of Biological Information and the Higher Taxonomic Categories. Here was trouble. The piece happened to be the first peer-reviewed article to appear in a technical biology journal, laying out the evidential case for intelligent design. According to ID theory, certain features of living organisms, such as the miniature machines and complex circuits within cells, are better explained by an unspecified designing intelligence than by an undirected natural process like random mutation and natural selection. Well, since that time, he's been trying to figure out how to save his career because they're trying to remove him, and of course, there is a lawsuit and that sort of thing that's going on. It doesn't matter that they had all kinds of scientific evidence for it. That doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter that there is no scientific evidence for evolution. In fact, evolutionary theory contradicts known scientific laws. Absolutely contradicts it. But they won't allow you to discuss this in school for fear that the students might catch on. And so they merely ridicule anyone who would believe. And when you say, well, let's discuss it, let's look at the evidence, they say, no, we're not even going to discuss this. It's so foolish that you would even think that. It just amazes me that the American people put up with that. I would think in universities where they're saying, well, let's discuss evidence, let's look at the various points of view, that they would want that. But now that the left-wing liberal establishment is in charge of universities, they don't even want political conservatives to have their voices heard there. And they'll be shouted down in the schools and physically threatened. And the same thing is happening in other ways as well. I don't know if you've heard about this new movie that's coming out in February by Ben Stein. It's called Expelled. No intelligence allowed. And here's Ben Stein, who is a Jewish filmmaker, finance genius. He was speechwriter for Nixon. He has done his own game show that he financed himself. I think he's a billionaire. The guy is brilliant in that way. He is saying that, first of all, as a Jew, he said, I find nothing objectionable about celebrating Christmas. What is going on with our culture? And then he's taking the position also, he said, you know, those who believe that there is a God who has created this are not allowed to say anything about it. So he's making a movie at his own expense, and it's coming out. If you want to go on the internet and see the trailers for it, it's really fascinating. And he's got on his website web links to all kinds of articles on evolution and creation. Outstanding resource. So if you type in there, Expelled, Ben Stein, Expelled, you will come to his website, and you go there, you can see some of the things that he's going to be putting out in February. So I encourage you to take a look at that. First of all, he's not a Christian, keep that in mind, but he is trying to state that those who have the position that's not favored by the authorities in the schools, at least they need to be able to state their case. Here is an article about this movie. Friends, I just came across a new documentary film featuring Ben Stein. It's scheduled to be released February 2008. The film, called Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed, tackles the growing problem of undiversity when it comes to the education of children in schools and the persecution of those who disagree with big science. Here's what WorldNet Daily says about it. In the movie, Stein, who is also a lawyer, economist, former presidential speechwriter, author, and social commentator, is stunned by what he discovers: an elitist scientific establishment that has traded in its skepticism for dogma. Even worse, say publicists for the feature film, along the way, Stein uncovers a long line of biologists, astronomers, chemists, and philosophers who've had their reputations destroyed and their careers ruined by a scientific establishment that allows absolutely no dissent from Charles Darwin's theory of random mutation and natural selection. For instance, as Expelled's official website asks, what freedom-loving student wouldn't be outraged to discover that his high school science teacher is teaching a theory as indisputable fact, and that university professors unmercifully crush any fellow scientists who dare question the prevailing system of belief? This isn't the latest Hollywood comedy. It's a disturbing new documentary that will shock anyone who thinks all scientists are free to follow the evidence wherever it may lead. They're not able to follow it. For example, Stein meets Richard Sternberg, double PhD biologist, who allowed a peer-reviewed research paper describing the evidence for intelligent design in the universe to be published, as we told you about that earlier there for the Smithsonian, where Steinberg was a research fellow. They began a coordinated smear and intimidation campaign to get the promising young scientist fired. The attack on scientific freedom was so egregious that it prompted a congressional investigation. In the film, Stein meets other scientists like astrobiologist Guillermo Gonzalez, who was denied tenure at Iowa State University in spite of an extraordinary record of achievement. Gonzalez made the mistake of documenting the design he has observed in the universe, and there are others